Okay. Oh, hello again. Now we've got the recording starting. So welcome everyone. Thank you speakers. Thank you attendees for joining. I have just a few housekeeping things before we get started. So first, just want to say it takes a lot of time on the organizers' part to put this together and volunteer their time outside of our day jobs. So for that, let's take a minute to appreciate the Convo Collective organizer team, Ollie, Ankur, Bhishma, who's running our Zoom today, Emily, Masha, Megan, Olga, who's running our Zoom chat today, Olivera, PJ, and Fatma. Thank you all so much. I do so much enjoy working with you. And attendees, if you don't know these people, connect with someone on LinkedIn. It's definitely great to know these people. They're great people. And speaking of networking, since Convo Collective is a volunteer-run organization, that means we rely on sponsorship. So if you are looking to hire conversation designers or speaker, sponsor, please get in touch with us, and we'll paste the links. I think we've got links going that we'll get pasting in the chat. So if you're interested in that, just click that link. And if you have not signed up yet, if this is your first time or you've heard about it from someone else, definitely take a moment to sign up at the link here. You can fill out our community form, provide feedback, sign up for a newsletter, join our Slack channel that we have where you can network in a closed environment. And we also have a LinkedIn group. So definitely go find those resources. And you can also learn about any upcoming events that we put on, usually monthly, by following us on Eventbrite, or you can go to convocollective.org, our official site with resources. And here is our quick agenda for today. So pretty much just all panel discussion with our awesome panelists. And then I will aim to end this on time for everyone involved. So that is my goal for you as the moderator. Okay, so almost time. So just before we get started, if you haven't yet, for everyone on the call, definitely drop a note in the chat. Let us know where you're joining in from, what city, state, country are you, and what brought you here. And definitely feel free to drop questions in the chat. I will try to get to them at different points in the panel. And we will get to them. I also have some questions from those of you who left them during registration that we'll get to. So thank you for that if you left a question. All right, so I'm going to switch over and stop screen sharing here. But first, I just want to start with some intros, and we'll go in the order on the screen here while Bhishma gets this all spotlighted. So yeah, panelists, why don't you take about 2 minutes to tell everyone how long you've been in conversation design, what you were doing before, and a brief overview of your role today. So yeah, starting left to right with Ashwini, why don't you say hello to everyone and introduce yourself. Welcome.
Thanks, Meredith. Thanks, Conversational Collective. First, I just want to thank you all for being here and just say that I've watched a lot of Conversational Collective events and benefited from them. They're super interesting. I love that you also have the videos on YouTube. So now I'm really excited to be part of a panel here. I'm Ashwini, and I'm originally from Hyderabad, India. I see some people from Hyderabad, so I have to say that. I've been a conversation designer for about 2 years now, but my love of language and human communication literally started way back in my undergrad. I have a degree in linguistics. I got a PhD because I was so passionate about understanding how humans communicate. And I was a professor of linguistics. So all of that background really helps me be a stronger designer. I love what I do. I felt so passionate about human communication that I feel very lucky to have found conversation design. I think I'll be talking a little bit more about my day-to-day and my work, so I'll stay away from that now.
Yes, awesome, thank you. Okay, so Chidi, why don't you go ahead? Hello.
Awesome. So I guess I'll kind of follow Ashwini's footsteps there and say, you know, I'm thankful to be here. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with everyone here today and my lovely panelists as well. So I'm Chidi Akuruwana. I'm based in the UK. I work as a lead AI designer and strategist for an organization called CGI. So we're like a IT consultancy, global IT consultancy. We're about 90,000 strong. Yeah, we've been doing some huge investments in the space of AI as well, which will be interesting to talk about later on. As far as, my background, so I come from very NLP focused background, so natural language, processing, worked as an NLP data scientist. And that sort of led me into chatbots, as you would imagine, and then started trying to build those and then realized design was really important. So that was about, 3 years ago now. And so we've been on that journey since, and yeah, it's been great. And yeah, we'll do a lot more talking later on, but nice to meet everyone.
Awesome. Thanks for that. And Tim, welcome.
Yeah, hi everyone. Good to see some familiar names in the chat already, actually. It's nice to see familiar faces and new faces. So I'm Tim. I have been a conversation designer like Ashwini for just over 2 years. And I started, my background is actually, I had a degree in journalism, and then I was a copywriter for a long time. So I came into this through a kind of sales and marketing route. And in my current job, I actually started as a copywriter and was doing conversation design for a couple of months before I knew it was called conversation design, what I was doing. So I work at Nibble, Nibble. They're a tech startup that's built a negotiating chatbot for online shopping. So we're a much more kind of engaging personal alternative to using a voucher code. And our conversations are rooted in tons of negotiation behavioral science. So yeah, I guess I'll talk more about that later. But all of my jobs so far have kind of quietly centered around empathy, which I think just naturally led me into conversation design. And that's what got me here. Yeah.
Awesome. Love the different backgrounds. That's great. So thought I'd kick it off since it's all about, day to day. What are conversation designers really doing in their day-to-day jobs? What is that like? We have people attending who want to get into conversation design, or maybe they're in their first role, and you kind of feel like you're on an island sometimes. This is a new field, right? So thought it would be fun to kick things off with what is one word or phrase describing what an average day is like for you in your role? Anyone want to take the first bat at that one?
I'm happy to go first. I would probably say diverse. And because I think as a conversational AI designer, you have to kind of get your hands in, involved in different things. So, and naturally, because I work for a consultancy, I'm dealing with multiple, customers or clients at the same time. So one moment you might be in one industry, and another moment you might be in another industry. You might be looking at strategy, and another moment you might be looking at design. And so, yeah, there's definitely there's no shortage of things to do from that end. But it's really interesting when you're able to do kind of different types of activities, and no day is the same. So I would say diverse.
Actually, I would follow that with unpredictable. On a similar vein, yeah, unpredictable for sure. You just don't know what each week or day will have in store for you.
I actually was going to say, I can't do a word, but I imagine like many of you play video games or like board games, and that's kind of how it is. You have like a set of tools that are a constant, but expect the unexpected, expect a lot of diversity. As you go, you have to just every day things might change, but there will also be some constants, and you might discover a secret passage somewhere. I don't know. It feels like I'm playing a video game with some really fun music at the background. So yeah, I have a visual of it. For me, it's like a visual to describe it. It's not a word.
Probably use a game.
Now we're all in 8-bit or 16-bit. Dodging, we're dodging the evil, players.
Yes. Be strategic.
Someone needs to make
Get
that
to the next level. Yeah.
Exactly. Cool. The awesome answers. Love that. So yeah, I wanted to talk first about Chidi. You mentioned strategy a bit, and I know you do that when we spoke before this. You play a lot of the strategy role as well in your day-to-day. So how do you think about forming strategy? You know, let's think it's hey, it's the beginning of the day and there's this new project. How are you guys thinking about, you know, what role do you play in it? And I'm sure each of you have a little bit of a different answer on that, given the types of companies that you're at. But how do you think about that? How do you go about that? What does that actually look like in practice to form a conversational AI strategy?
Yeah, no, it's definitely an interesting ride, I'll tell you that. But typically, I mean, so it sort of depends how the opportunity comes. In some cases, the customer may come and already have an idea of what it is that they want to do. And so you're immediately kind of, you know, walking from that point with the customer, that particular point in the journey. But I'm going to take the question from this angle. Let's say customers just come, they want to use conversational AI. They know it's advantageous for their business. And so from a strategic point of view, the first thing I try to let them know is, you know, have you got a use case, right? And the point of strategy is to help them identify the right use cases for conversational AI. Because at the end of the day, conversational AI is a form of automation, and it's not going to solve every single problem. And so the mistake a lot of people make is they just try to throw conversational AI at everything. And then they say, well, it doesn't work. And, you know, then you have all these bad experiences of bots online that give, you know, the designers like us and other people in the industry a bad name. And I think you have to deal with the strategy first. And so it's helping them kind of go through maybe, I don't know, circa 10 business processes that they have in mind that are high pain points for the business, and then assessing those businesses in, you know, based on a couple of, you know, criteria. So number one, what is the end-to-end journey? What does it currently look like? You know, what is the business challenge that we're solving here? Is there any business challenge? Is there a real business case for doing this? Who are the users that are involved? And that also allows us to start to think about, you know, just what the user experience would look like. What are the current user challenges? And then you need to look at the technical side of things, because I'm technical as well. So I would start to ask questions like, what channels are involved? Is it the backend systems? Are they API friendly, or are they legacy? Because then that means, okay, from an integration perspective, that's a bit more of a challenge. And you know, you just go on and on and on. So that could take, you know, depending on how many use cases we're looking at, that could take maybe anything from 2 weeks to a month. But that is really kind of what the strategy piece is. And the outcome of that is that at the end of the day, you're able to rank these different processes that you've kind of, you know, assessed together, of course, in collaboration with, you know, business analysts within that organization, for example, you know, so that they can give you kind of what the process looks like and documentation on all of that stuff. And then, okay, yes. So, and exactly, so you do that. And then, of course, you rank those processes, maybe based on, you know, using complexity benefits analysis, where you actually say, right, these are low, medium use cases, these are low complexity use cases, but they have high benefits. And the idea there is to pick out the quick wins that will deliver immediate value as soon as you go into that design and build phase. So for me, I look at strategy as that sort of approach. Of course, there's much more to it, and we could dive into those details if anybody has any more questions. But typically, that is my approach from a strategic point of view.
That's a great answer. Yes, in the chat. This is really important. With you, Chidi. Yes, so many great things there. I guess, yeah, I'll just comment, and then if anyone else wants to add, Tim Rashwini. Yeah, it's sometimes coming with, it sounds like you have those questions ready to go, right? So you probably do it several times. So I'm sure you have a list of questions you run through. And yes, what you said, 100% important to define what is that best use case. It is definitely not always, hey, we should build a bot for, you know, in the same way everyone says there's an app for that. There's not always a bot for that will magically solve something, or
exactly.
You know, AI isn't necessarily the solution for everything, but that's our job, right? To find those connections. Anything you want to add on developing strategy? Go ahead.
Yeah, I was actually going to add that if you are coming from a UX research perspective, I think you can view your clients as your subject. And, you know, when they share the pain points with you, remember, you are the expert. So while they have certain solutions in mind, you are the one that is able to determine what is actually the right solution. Also, I think the other thing to think about is not to not to kind of tell them, no, we can't do that, but think about, can we have a phased approach, right? So when you think of strategy, I think of phases. What's phase one that we can get out quickly? What's phase two? And sharing that strategy with your customer to show them, yeah, we will reach that end goal. Here's how we will do it. So a lot of conversation design, I think, is that strategy, storytelling, because you are the expert and you have a lot of technical knowledge, but you have to think about how do you convey that in simple terms to your customer, to your client, in a way that they see the value in it as well, and they trust your expertise.
Absolutely.
Good point. Anything to add, Tim?
No, just that I agree 100%, Chidi, that people expect conversational AI to do everything sometimes, when actually you get the best results if you do one thing really, really well, right?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I think even in our case, the end user doesn't expect conversational AI to do everything. If you frame the conversation quickly, they know what they're there for, they know what to expect. Like,
that's right.
People don't
that's
want
right.
it to do everything for them.
Yeah. They wanted to do specific things that are specific to the problem that they want solved, and so we always have to think along those lines, and it makes the design process and the rest of the build so much more straightforward, I think. So
yeah, totally good point. And sometimes it's just getting them to another area, a website or an app at times, and then letting AI do what AI does best, right? Great points, everyone. So yeah, I think I'll move straight into the topic that's on everyone's mind right now. So we mentioned unpredictability, and I think we've got some questions in the chat about, unknowns and changing technology. So would definitely love to know from each of you, how has your day-to-day changed because of generative AI, LLMs? What does that look like? What was before and what is now? And obviously we're all probably working on proprietary things at some level, so don't give away any trade secrets, of course, but how are you thinking about that, or what are you thinking about changing in your day-to-day due to generative AI? Anyone want to kick that off?
I will say that, yeah, it's obviously, I mean, I got here today knowing this was going to be something that we would talk about, because it's just, an unavoidable topic. And I think from our perspective, so from myself and my team, the way we're looking at it is sort of how it's supercharging the design process. Generally speaking, you'd have to craft your intents and your example responses and all this entity synonyms, which can be quite, a tedious process. So now being able to use a single prompt to kind of speed up that iterative cycle for you, where you go through a series of entities and synonyms and intents. So that definitely is something that is changing dramatically. I think where the balance of that, of course, is allowing the sort of generative AI technology to face customers directly. And I suppose from a design perspective, we're now kind of battling the question of, at what point does that fit into the process? At what point do you use an intent? At what point do you use generative AI? Do you get rid of intents? Do you get rid of, and so, and I think that's kind of where we're still trying to figure out the best way to do that. There are definitely example architectures out there. Like I've seen someone who was talking about, having the intent recognition, recognize the intent, but then the intent, when recognized, corresponds to a specific prompt, which you can then use to prompt a large language model and give a response back to the user. But I definitely think brands still care about, wanting to have a strong say in what goes to the customers. And especially for us, because we work with, some type of clients that would want to have a very specific control on that. And so I think we are a bit more we're a bit more sort of careful with that approach from a design perspective. But certainly, as far as everyday process, it's definitely, in my opinion, supercharging kind of the way we do design.
I can follow on to that, because actually I find in my day-to-day, so ChatGPT hasn't supercharged my design process in terms of writing copy as much as I thought it might. if I'm trying to craft different responses to the same intent, if I try and use GPT to help me with that, it feels a bit like looking for a diamond in the rough, because I'll get like 20 really just thesaurus responses, basically. And I'm looking for something that I would have written. And by the time I find it, I think I could have just written that myself and gotten the same response. But we're definitely looking into using GPT at Nibble. We're already using it on some back-end stuff, but like you, we're very careful and cautious about when we put that into anything that is customer facing. So far, we're only going to use it as a supplement to Nibble's functionality to respond to certain things that we'd never be able to ordinarily. And it's just that little pinch of like magic dust on top of a sentence. But we always want to have the option to kind of quickly turn that off and to have a fallback of a pre-written, copywritten response, even if it's much more generic. Because honestly, in my case, a lot of retailers, they're too nervous to think of trusting a Gen AI with their customer base. They'd rather have something pre-written. But I think it needs to be there as an option. And so we're looking into a fine-tuned model right now. But we're going to have a backup option always.
Yeah, I would say that how it's changed, maybe I can, I feel like at LifePerson, we are definitely, into Gen AI, adopted it pretty quickly. And one of the things that, first of all, I've noticed is all of the designers were really like, I think this is one of our strengths. We learn really quickly. So there's new technology out there. One of the strengths of most conversation designers is get in there, be curious, learn about it, which is really helpful because then we can assess the technology and think about what are some good use cases, as you mentioned, for it. Because if we are talking about any type of legal implications, we really need to be careful, and our customers and clients want to be careful about the wording. And Gen AI is very creative. So definitely trying to think about what are our parameters, where are our boundaries, and what is our strategy behind using Gen AI? When do we use it? When do we not use it? So, but again, I think we're a company that does a lot of, let's test it fast. So personally, I really like that approach because I think, you can spend a lot of time thinking about how do we use this, talking about it and discussing it. But I think testing it internally quickly helps us also come up with those, the parameters, the boundaries.
I think you went on mute. No. We will, I think you automatically went on mute. We might be having some AV.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I said it's been also exciting to work with the product team. So a lot of like the Gen AI stuff that's coming out, if you look at the teams working on it, they don't necessarily have to think about conversation design or involve conversation designers, right? And I think as they start putting out their products, they realize the value of conversation designers. So that's something that has changed as well, where, having that input, having a place at that table is something I've seen change in product, where they recognize that conversation designers are really important. So I would say, I think it's a positive change for us. So I appreciate, I want to be up to date. Yeah.
Just really quickly as well, I think, to Tim's point about, how it can affect the sort of design process and, his sort of creative process. I think one of the things that becomes very apparent as you begin to play with the technology is, the area of prompt engineering. And so I think from a conversation design perspective, is almost like another skill set that you kind of have to acquire to be able to interact with the large language model. And so that you can actually, because I think the strength in the model lies in your ability to interact with it and get the desired output from the large language model. So I think that's going to play a huge part in how the sort of impact it has on your kind of workflow. So I just thought I'll point that out.
Yeah, very good point on the prompt engineering, and really interesting answers, from, hey, let's supercharge, it's a supercharged process. Love that quote, Chidi. Tim's like, well, I want to I want to be able to use it, but we're still testing it and we're trying to figure out the right use case. And Ashwini, your point about the testing phase and getting that design point of view is super important. But on the prompt engineering note, before we move on, I want to talk about kind of iteration and process, but I'm curious, where are you guys looking for inspiration or learning about this? Do you have any sources or anything that you found interesting, or is it primarily just through like test and learn, you know, in the day-to-day, see what you learn as you go?
Well, I think for us, it's a combination of a lot of things, really. So obviously I have an NLP background, so I know how the models themselves work underneath, which is a nice little advantage. And then I'm able to sort of, kind of use that in my research. So, but I know as far as content, I probably will name drop Cobus Graylin. I think his stuff is really good, in terms of explaining, because there's so many applications that are just coming up, so many frameworks. So he does a nice job of sort of keeping up with that. And generally speaking, just kind of following that up and then testing it in combination with that. And then we do also have within, as I said, CGI, we've invested over, and I know I can say this because this is public, we've invested about $1 billion in AI over the next 3 years. So we are like really going for it. And there are lots of conversations happening internally. And so we're also, educating ourselves, and then, and educating our clients as well. So I think that's kind of been our approach.
Awesome.
I think I was going to say I couldn't point to a specific resource, but in the conversation design world, there's no lack of resources. People are very helpful, want to share their learnings. So if you do a quick Google search, you will find it. And it's the same thing with prompt engineering. But I also wanted to, I actually noticed I'm going to Voice and AI in September, and I noticed that they have a workshop on voice engineering and several talks. So that is another way for people to learn about it. So if you're looking for where do I learn about this, there are resources online, but you could also attend a conference and learn. But as Chidi pointed out, different platforms have different ways of doing this. So in the end, it's about learning general skills and then being able to apply it to your specific context.
Welcome to the Conversational Collective as well.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, if anyone else is going to that conference next month, the Voice and AI conference, definitely put that in the chat and maybe everyone can meet up. Yeah, great answers. I'll move on unless you have anything else to add, Tim, on
actually, I would just say for some day-to-day, like small Gen AI stuff, there is so much on LinkedIn, but Brett Kinsella has this great daily newsletter called Gen AI News Gain. It's very handy for me because it's just like a few short links every day. It's not overwhelming and it just keeps you up to date with what's going on. That's one specific thing I would recommend people subscribe to.
That's awesome. Yeah, I need to take a look at that myself. Great points, you guys. Very specific things that we can action on. Okay, so let's move on to the iteration part of your day. So wanted to talk a minute about your process, tools that you use. What does that really look like? And I think a fun way to maybe ask that is, what programs, what tabs, what docs are on your screen? What lives on there every day that you use? Anyone want to start? You want to go ahead, Tim, and start that one?
Sure. I mean, for me, honestly, I feel like this is quite a basic answer, but it is mostly Figma and an Excel spreadsheet that is enormous. And those are my two things that are always open. And then similar to what I said before as well, for whenever I want a productive break, LinkedIn is there. And if you can tap into the conversation design like community, it's almost like inspiration where you don't realize you're going to find it because you just see people talking about different stuff that's along the lines of what you're working on. But I basically, for my design process, it's Figma, it's Excel, and it's every brand that I'm working with, and just some good instrumental music on top of that.
Nice.
That's brilliant.
Your picture of that.
Yeah, I have to say, I'm happy to hear about the instrumental music. I'm not the only one that does that. If I have any lyrics playing, I'll be singing along.
No, I can't have lyrics. Yeah, too distracting.
Yeah. But no, I was also going to say, yes, we use Lucid. So Lucid chart is definitely always open, multiple tabs, depending on all the clients I have. But character counters, any type of website that has a character counter, a dictionary. I love using a dictionary. I also have our developer page open to, I need to know the platform and what we can do on it. We have several design templates and kits open, available. So have that open so I can iterate quickly, design quickly, get ideas from, what has previously been done. There's a website called language.gov in the US that talks about, how to use inclusive language, how to use language at a lower reading level so the bots are accessible to everyone. I use that page a lot as well. And inclusive in terms of also not saying, things like see when you or maybe not everyone in your audience can actually see. So, and then I have my calendar because I actually put time on my calendar to know when I'm working on what. The other thing I recommend everyone does is there is, like I said, so much out there to read and learn. I have bookmarks and I save, articles to read, or and then when I want to take a break, or when I'm like, has someone written about this? I just go and browse through what I've saved first so I can catch up. But yeah, so the inclusive but it's language.gov, if I'm not mistaken. I'll send it to plainlanguage.gov. Thank you, Mike. Yes. Okay, that is it.
That's a great resource. Yeah, really, really good point. And you said you use that primarily for inclusivity and kind of simplifying language.
Yeah, checking the level, is it comprehensible what I'm writing to, a wide audience. So yeah, because we don't need many fancy words to describe what we want the user to complete, actions to take. So it's a good reminder too, hey, check your language, spend a little bit more time on your copy. Don't just put out the first copy you write. So yeah.
Great answer. Anything else to add, Chidi?
I'm quite similar with Ashwini as well. So I'll probably have, sometimes we use Lucidchart, and I'll have Excel open as well. But because I'm also a consultant, I will have loads of files open, documents that I have to read and things of that nature. And I actually have a conversational AI design cheat sheet, that folder that I created, and it has all my kind of proven resources and frameworks, and so I always have that open for reference. So I think that's a good thing, good practice to have if anybody wants to think about doing that. I also use calendars, like Ashwini said, so I use my calendar a lot, regular blocks. I think it's a nice way to kind of keep tabs on everything and follow up on things that you need to follow up on. And definitely whatever framework or platform, chatbot platform we're using, that's always open, because you're constantly looking at, what did we do for that flow, and what did we, and so yeah, so we're all pretty much along the same lines.
Nice. Yeah, and that's great, leading right into my next question. I was going to ask about that, is the platform. So sometimes this is a debatable topic on how much time or what responsibilities the conversation designer has of putting things in the platform. So curious on how you think about that, and even just your kind of how you divide your time between using the platform versus staying outside of it and doing that kind of design work. We mentioned there's spreadsheets, diagramming, there's the writing piece. How do you guys think about that with whatever platform that you use? Do you want to go first, Ashwini?
Yeah, I can go first. I was going to say, I think this is one of the things that, for me, the tools, I think we have opportunity for growth with the tools in the conversation design field, because most of the tools, I think, if the tool is something that you can use to actually build the bot, it's a pretty simple tool so far. So, I think there are a lot of people doing good work out there trying to build more complex tools. But just because I think the tools are not there yet, I prefer having a Lucidchart or something like that, and then the platform separate, because for me, when I have to present something to the client, if I show them the platform, it's very overwhelming to them. Whereas if I can show them on Lucidchart a simple walkthrough, a high-level design, It's something they understand, they can ask questions about. They're looking at the big perspective. They're not necessarily looking at what the customer sees yet. But yeah, so that's the other thing I was going to say, that creating like a demo is also really helpful to walk the customer through what is your client, what is the user actually going to see. But so far for me, definitely, like I like having, I go into the platform a lot because again, like I said, I look at, but I think it depends on the project, but I go into the platform to look at what's already existing, how are we modifying it. But Lucidchart is where I do my main design. I also go into the platform to look at the conversations that have already happened. At LivePerson, we iterate a lot and we build very complex designs. So I feel like looking at the conversations to discover pain points and discover solutions, discover user behavior. I use the platform a lot for things like that. And then I translate all of that into Lucidchart as solutions.
Yeah.
But I really like having that user-friendly, and I think many people might be like, well, maybe Lucidchart is not the most user-friendly, and we can debate that. But I think it's about how you present it to the clients. But I think it's more user-friendly than the platform.
Yeah, I agree as well, to be fair, because I've been on both sides of this. In my sort of early days, I used to work with Rasa a lot. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that tool. So definitely, I've been on the side of just going straight into the platform and building in there. And I've also, in recent years, been on the side of kind of designing outside of that. And I will definitely advocate for the latter. And the reason is because, you know, when you start designing straight into the platform, your thought process isn't clearly finished yet. And so it can become a lot more messy, and it may not be as elegant as you would want it to be. And you may just, you know, have to redo a lot of things. And so I think it's much better. I mean, whichever tool you want to use is entirely up to you and whatever works. But I think the principle is having, excuse me, that design thought process separated from the platform so that you can, so that when you start working in the platform, it's pretty straightforward for you to kind of, you know, move pretty quickly. So I would say that's my take on that.
Yeah, I completely agree with Ashwini. I think when we're dealing with like external stakeholders, a high-level demo is great to show them the idea of what we're going to do without getting into the specifics and getting into the nitty-gritty. But if I'm working on something internal, sometimes it actually helps to just put something up in platform so you can kind of play with it and get a sense for how it feels. Admittedly, it is going to be messy and dirty and a bit clunky, but sometimes that helps more than anything, you know, just getting that really rough first experience.
Yeah. I will say as well.
I think I was going to say also for version control, you know, so even if your platform has version control, being able to show a design side by side, here's what you do, here's what we're moving to, is on a same page, you know, on the same page is really valuable. So thinking about version control, I think it's helpful. And then, yeah, you can make Lucid other tools. I'm using Lucid, but any other of, you know, similar tools. But you can also be more technical. You can, I don't know, lots of tools have the layering. If, you know, you can layer it. So you can be like, here's the dev layer, you know, on top of just the high level design. So I like using all of those, that functionality to work in my favor. So yeah, I think it is really helpful to have them separate, the tool and the platform.
Yeah, I was just going to add that the way you design as well could change from platform to platform. So I think that's another thing. I mean, we've seen cases where a customer is currently using a platform that we've obviously put the solution for, or they're coming from a different platform and they want to change to another platform. So I think this is where having those design artifacts actually make a huge difference to Ashwini's point, because if you want to migrate to another platform, then, you know, and most platforms don't make it easy for you to leave. So just thought I'd throw that in there.
Gotta be sticky. Yeah, some people, we have Eugene put Miro, you know, that's another one. I don't think I saw voice flow mentioned yet, but obviously there's.
But
there's
yeah, absolutely.
Anyone using voice flow right now?
Yeah, I've definitely used it. So in some things.
Oh, yep, and too. I wanted to ask a question from the chat kind of on this topic before we go into more around inclusivity and advocating for best practices in design. But when you guys think about showing your portfolio, whenever the last time that was, how do you show that when these diagrams and these experiences are so complex? They're very big. So do you go more high level when you think about presenting for interviewing? I know a lot of people are interviewing right now. Any feedback or ideas for those who are interviewing on that?
I can share my experience. Now, is that the right way to go is something you're going to have to determine. But I think, so when I got my first job at LivePerson, that was the first time I got a job as a conversation designer. I had no background as a conversation designer. I knew I could do it because of my background in linguistics and my interest in, just in general, human communication, bots, and everything I'd learned about machine learning. So my approach was to, in my portfolio, not just have like a lucid, and not just have the flow, but to have my thought process commenting on the flow, every step of the flow. What am I thinking here? Why did I do this? Because I really think design is intentional. And when you're interviewing for a first-time role, how does the manager assess you? Unless they have a conversation with you, but the conversation happens later. You need to get to the conversation. So how do you get to the conversation? You show them ahead of time. Here's my thinking. Get them curious about your thinking. Get them to see that you are thinking the right way, because really, like, they can change certain actions if they're like, our platform doesn't allow that. We need a different solution. You can learn that quickly. But it's about showing them what's your thought process. So I think I've seen a lot of portfolios where someone might present a flow and that's it. But I really want to know, why did you do what you did? So for a first-time designer, I think that's the way to go. Now, I think once you're an experienced designer, things change, because I think then it's more about what did you deliver? What was your impact? Are you able to talk about that strategy, business goals, KPIs? So it's a little bit different, I think, because once you're a designer, I think once you have that experience, I think it's pretty obvious you wouldn't have held a job for long if you weren't able to do conversation design. So really thinking, it's kind of like the thing about when you are an early designer and when you're a more mature designer. Early designers think a lot about get the flow right, get the copy right, and mature designers are thinking more about strategy, is what I think. Building relationships, strategy, how do I measure success? So, but I do think if you're an early designer, you should have a flow and add your thought process to it.
Very good. Yeah, makes sense.
I second that 100%. I've been on the side of interviewing designers, so and I could say if you're in that early stage, and have no experience, I would be looking to just kind of understand, why you're getting into the field, if that helps, because obviously it's not something that there's a university degree out there, and so trying to understand kind of your mindset, and of course the things that Ashwini mentioned as well as about thought process. For more mature designers, I'm looking to see, if you've actually what projects you've worked on and kind of how you navigated the journey, the workflow process.
Awesome. So yeah, we have a lot of questions coming in. I wanted to definitely get to the advocating stage of your day, and maybe this doesn't happen every day, but you know it when it's needed, right? So advocating for whether it's inclusion, ethical concerns. Ashwini mentioned playinglanguage.gov is one way to kind of check yourself on that side of things. So maybe think about a time you had to advocate, stand up and say, that's not right, or there's a better way to do this that we need to be thinking about. How do you communicate that? Usually it's to a non-design stakeholder, whether it's a client or someone internally. Any tips or, think about, a time this has happened that you might want to share? Let's see, Tim, do you have anything in mind on that?
I mean, I can certainly think of times where you're definitely right. It's people from a non-design or not even in the realm of chatbots. So when we're working with certain retailers, we have to educate them at the same time as showing them any prototypes. Like the amount of retailers who want Nibble to pretend to be a human is staggering. And it's so horrible to mislead someone like that, right? And so I'm at the point now, I almost get that in before they can even mention that they want Nibble to be called, XYZ, a human name, and say, I'm from the sales team. So I almost think it's about being proactive with people who, general perception, they're going to have thoughts that just don't mesh well with conversation design. In terms of internally, though, as well, I mean, and building inclusivity. So we at Nibble bi-weekly have a continual improvement meeting where we all show up with real chats that have happened in the last 2 weeks. And we actively look for problems or things where it went really well, but honestly, more so problems and figuring out what did we get wrong here and how could we improve that for next time. And I just couldn't stress enough the importance of taking an hour out every week, at least, to flick through real conversations people are having and see it. That's where you'll find when, as careful as you are, you'll trip up, right? And, yeah.
Agreed. I mean, I would come at it from a slightly different angle because I'm a consultant and we internally, obviously, we care about ethics and we have checks and balances and internal governance processes to ensure that we are compliant. So it's more or less educating the client that you're designing for and building for. And that's where that strategy piece comes in again, as I alluded to earlier on in the process, is that you want to, so one of the ways I've done it is to really make sure that, just similar to Tim, that's part of the conversation almost immediately. And making sure that that's something you're talking and being quite plain and honest about. Just like Tim, we've had some people say, well, and in some cases, for example, they say we want to replace people, with this bot, for example. I mean, that again, is almost against some of the principles of responsible AI when it comes to human-centered design and things of that nature. So you have to be able to, explain the risks and dependencies and be quite clear with the client at that level of the discussion and the conversation. And sometimes that might be a meeting that we're walking into for the first time, trying to get the person to go into business, and that might be the end of that meeting. And you might not have that conversation, end of that conversation, might not have that forward. But I think that's certainly one of the ways. And as far as inclusivity, I also take it to, I think with again, similar to Tim, it's almost like a feedback loop has to be part of that, right? You have to think about testing inclusivity in your designs, especially from an accessibility perspective. I think it's very difficult. You do your research, have ideas and how you want to make your design more inclusive, but I think it's difficult to really do that without testing it properly with the actual users. And so, without being long-winded, there's different ways you could do that.
Yeah, I'll just add, try to be brief. I agree with everything my panelists have said, Chidi and Tim. But I think one of the things, a tip is, if you're working with a brand, go look up their website, go look up what do they say on Twitter, what do they say on LinkedIn, how are they being inclusive? So it gives you, again, it helps you build that strategy of how am I going to approach this with the brand? If they're already being very inclusive, give them kudos, tell them, hey, I noticed your platform, your website, you're very inclusive and we would love to incorporate that into the bot, right? So, I mean, always try to go with that positive note. And if not, don't mention it, but know what you're up against, right? But also, I think there are many layers to inclusivity. And so, as you mentioned, Chidi, testing is really important. And I'm thinking of some simple examples where, when you think of inclusivity, if you think of language, depends on the language you're working on. Several languages have gender. So how are you going to address that? Do you want, but also at a higher level, thinking about people that are technologically savvy and groups that are not technologically savvy. I made this fatal mistake of having a button that said, register here. and or something like that, something very similar to register here, where people thought by clicking the button, they were registering. Instead of clicking the button takes you to the website that registers you. So what I missed was who's the demographic using that button, right? So that was a good learning lesson for me. So when we think of inclusivity in chatbots, there are different layers. I don't think we have right now the time to like cover everything, but I think we've given some great ideas here to at least start you off.
Yeah, that's yeah, great answers. This is a whole topic in and of itself, obviously, but you all gave us a good kind of drive-by high level of some things to think about and some very specific things. And yeah, way to point out a learning, Ashwini, on that register thing. That's a really good point. And it's hard to recognize that when it's happening in the moment, right? Okay, so many questions. I couldn't get to all of them today, but I'll ask one final question because I think this is a good one kind of to zoom out from everything that we talked about today. So thinking about the future, what do you all think will change in your day-to-day 2 years from now? What might be different? And maybe that's to do with Gen AI or other technology, or how far our industry will come, or it could be in other ways. Any thoughts on that? What does that look like 2 years from now? Or if you want to go further out to 5 years, 10 years, that's fine too.
That's a very interesting question. I think it depends. Sorry, go on, Tim.
Are you sure? I mean, so I was going to say, I have no idea what 2 years will look like, let alone 5 or 10. 5 or 10, no clue. I don't think anyone can answer that. And in 2 years, I think, for me, when I look at my future, I think it's going to be a case of conversation designers needing to learn to work with things like Gen AI, but also understanding how your skill set goes beyond that, beyond being a prompt engineer, beyond being anything else, like working with it to elevate your experience, because I think there's going to be a lot of chatbots out there built solely on Gen AI, and they'll feel quite similar, I think, to one another. And the difference is going to be the people who can work with that to pull out the real magic.
I think that's bang on. I think I was thinking along the same thing, because it does depend on a few things. It depends on, where generative AI will be in 2 years. Obviously, a year ago, we're not even having this conversation. So yeah, it will be interesting to see what the conversational AI design role evolves to in the next 2 years, and what that will look like, and the type of skill sets that you'll need to have, and how you work with prompt engineering, as Tim mentioned. But I also think, again, to Tim's point, as far as the bots being similar, I think it'll be interesting to see how people think architecturally in terms of the way they build their chatbot solutions, because I think that's going to change quite tremendously. Frameworks are adapting generative AI more and more, and so even the way that the chatbot platforms themselves work will be slightly different. There might be more features in there that the designer needs to think about as far as the dialogue design goes. And so, yeah, it seems like more questions than answers, but definitely lots to think of. So,
yeah, on the tech side, I agree. Like, technology is changing quickly, but I'm actually curious about what are new ways we're going to engage the customer. Like, TikTok was not something we all expected, right? So are we still stuck in chatbots and messaging right now? Is there going to be like a new way? Like, I don't know. I like to dream big. I don't know what that solution is, but I'm like, something's going to come. So I don't know what that is, but really I'm thinking bigger about ways to engage with people, So yeah, and then I think I'm also pretty concerned about the ethical aspect. So I hope we take that seriously and move forward with more ethical products. And I think one way all of us can try to help with that is to be not passive, but really actively involved in making product decisions. So try, if you have the energy and the interest, volunteer yourself, put yourself in those positions, take those opportunities, because those of us that care about it are the ones that have to make that change. So, yeah.
Great closing remark. So we are at time, but I feel like we could talk forever. We need a part 2 to this conversation, I feel like. But thank you, Chidi, Ashwini, and Tim. Thank you so much. Really good comments today. And I think you've shown us the day-to-day is unpredictable and diverse, and we are adapting and we are learning quickly and supercharging everything we do with Gen AI, right? So thank you so much again, and thank you everyone for joining us today. We'll end this on time so you can get on with your day, and we'll see you next time. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.